Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Taking Care of Business webinar from the Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership at the School of Management at UB. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our fifth webinar. As always, I want to thank you to our sponsors, the Bonadeo Group and Uniland. Thank you for your support. And as I always start reminding everybody, actually next week we celebrate our 30th year here at CEL. I'm really excited about all of our graduates and mentors, reactors, and everybody that's part of our program. So today we're going to talk about where you're going. And my experience from working with hundreds of businesses is that many seem to be drifting aimlessly. A lot of us don't have any clue where we're going or what the future holds. We just go about our work day to day, and some of us get lucky and are wildly successful, and I've seen a lot of that. But some of us end up falling hard and we fail. But most people that we work with, what I see is there's this kind of in-between area where a lot of businesses fall. And I call it being destined to a life of feeling like you never quite make enough money, you work a little bit too hard. And I see a lot of people even start to resent their business when it starts to look like it owns them. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And some of this overlaps from past webinars a little bit because these topics keep coming up over and over and over again. But why many businesses don't know where they're going. And there's a bunch of reasons that I've got here. They don't have a clearly defined competitive advantage, which we've talked about before. They haven't taken the time to build a great team. They're constantly cash poor. They fail to manage. We've talked about this before too. They operate in chaos, and I'll get into that a little bit, but think about always firefighting and never having the time to create a vision for the future. And remember, if we're going to have a great team, we need to be a visionary leader that creates a vision for where we're going so the team has something to look forward to and knows where the organization is going. We're not clear about who our ideal customer is. And a lot of us believe that if we sell to everybody and just get a little piece of everybody, that we're going to be successful. And that is not the answer to success. And we'll dig into that a little bit. They don't have a strategic plan, or worse, they've made the strategic planning process so complicated that it's destined for failure. And even if you have all this, if you don't have a clearly defined execution strategy, how are you going to even think about moving things forward? So there's a lot of questions that entrepreneurs have to ask themselves, in my opinion. The big ones are, where do you want to go as an entrepreneur? Where do you want to take your organization? The second would be, if I know where I'm going to go, how am I going to get there? What resources do I need? Do I have a really clear direction? Am I going to be able to make enough money or have sufficient profits for growth and capital investment and long-term sustainability? And have I chosen the right growth rate if I am growing? We'll talk again a little bit more about that. Another area that often entrepreneurs to talk about is, can I play the role that I've chosen for myself inside this business? Meaning, am I the CEO, or am I the chief marketer, or am I the best person at selling? What are my skills, and how do I fit in? Choosing the right team, we've talked about that a lot. Making sure we have the right infrastructure supported by systems so you can execute a strategy once you have one. And the idea of, often in a small business, we have to have a lot of flexibility as a leader in our role. You know, moving from areas, we've talked before about Michael Gerber's work and about being a technician and working in your business versus working on your business. And I don't ever want to say in a small business that you're not going to have to work in it, because that would not be true. We do have to have times that we have to actually be physically working in our business. But the question is, how do we move back and forth from being a technician to a strategy expert? And how do we move from the doing to creating the vision for where we're going? There's an article that I use a lot with one of our MBA students that I like a lot. And we've talked about some of this in past webinars, but the article is by Noam Wasserman, who's a professor at Harvard and has a very famous article that comes from a book that he wrote called The Founder's Dilemma. We've approached this before lifestyle, choosing whether we want to have a lifestyle business or a business that we're going to scale up and potentially sell and exit, so that maybe has investors in it, and the difference between those two. He refers to it as king versus rich, and very similar discussion we've had. And you know that I'm a huge proponent of lifestyle businesses if that's what you choose to do. But if you're not clear about what you want to do with your business and how you want to grow it and where you want to go, you're going to not have the right structure. You won't be able to create the right structure to support it. So he talks a lot about entrepreneurs when they're starting, especially making this decision. If I'm going to be king and control everything and be the CEO forever, that potentially has limitations. If I want to grow and have investors and potentially exit, I may have to step down as CEO. And his article goes on to say that 4 out of 5 CEOs eventually are forced to step down if they're on the I want to scale and be rich, so to speak. So the question is making sure, again, that you're clear as an entrepreneur. What are you growing? Are you growing a lifestyle business to support the lifestyle that you want? And once again, I am 110% behind that. Or are you trying to scale something? And make sure you're really, really clear about it, because the game you play certainly has different rules, different stakes, and also potentially a different quitting time. One can last a lifetime. Another may have a period of 8 to 10 years, 7 years, typically where you're in business, you're trying to grow it, and you're trying to exit it. Another person that really respect a lot of his work is Bill Ullett, who wrote a book called Disciplined Entrepreneurship. He's at MIT. And I love this cartoon that they have in their workbook. And this talks about what does it take to have a great business? And a lot of us don't think about this. A lot of us think it's all about the market or all about the idea. Certainly really important, but if you look at the pie that's in front of you, look how big the team is. We've talked again about this before, but our team, critically important that we build a good team. And it doesn't matter if we have a great idea. It doesn't matter if we have a market. It doesn't even matter if we have a team if we can't execute. So in the end, successful businesses are all about the team's ability to execute on their strategy. And of course, I've seen so many businesses not have a really clearly defined paying customer. So remember, again, you can have the best idea in the world and you can think you have the hottest product in the world or the hottest service. If somebody's not willing to pay you for it, you don't necessarily have a business, or you obviously don't have a business. Another area we have to be thinking about that a lot of us get lost in is who is our ideal customer, or who's our ideal paying customer. And that's a real question that we need to answer, and many of us don't. So these are people that will buy our product at the best price point, or what we might call an optimal price point, where we can have really great margins and profits to make our company sustainable. They're a real person, obviously, and these people have wants and needs and fears, and there's a whole emotional part of the purchase that we've talked about in previous webinars, the one that we talked about a lot about customer loyalty and the head versus heart decision. They also related to the kind of the soft side or the biological side of who we are. They've got emotions and interests that make them want to buy your product. So who is that customer? And to be successful, we have to focus on the ideal customer. And so many times we don't. And how do we get to an ideal customer? This pizza with all the different toppings on here is to remind me it's really about market segmentation. And you have to understand that not everyone is your customer. The whole world is not your customer. Seth Godin likes to talk a lot about the new big is small. So what's the segment or what's the niche that you can own, that you can dive into? That's the key to having a successful business. Once we know what the niche is, and once we understand that particular spot where we can penetrate deeply and own a large piece of the market, that becomes a beachhead. And from there, if we can take out, just like this picture with the bowling picture, if you think of the beachhead as a head pin, if we can hit that in the right spot, we can later go to other markets. We can go to other verticals and expand. But for any of you that are really trying to stand up a business or you're stuck, I'm going to say if you're stuck or you're just getting started, don't think of the world as being your customer. Figure out what segment is your customer that you can speak to clearly, that you can spend your marketing dollars on optimally, and you can grow that beachhead market. And to do that, we certainly have to see the world through the eyes of our customer. We can't look through the lens of our company. We can't force people to buy what we want them to buy. Once we start seeing the world through the eyes of our customer, you'll see that it's not really a push sale, it's a pull sale, because we're providing what they want. We're giving them what they're asking for. So really important to not try to push what we're trying to sell on people, but rather to listen to them, to know what they're looking for, and to provide that for them. We did talk about this in another webinar. We went into depth about competitive advantage, but just to remind you, a lot of us have no clue what our competitive advantage is. If you are stalled, if your revenues are stalled, I'm going to pretty much guarantee you don't have any significant competitive advantage. And where can you find that? To remind you, you can find that in cost leadership, you can find that in innovation, you can find that in customer intimacy, you can find that in any of these three areas. But these are the areas that you want to look for competitive advantage. And again, if you're stuck, you need to look at your strategy and where are you going, and do you have a clearly defined segment and market that you can truly try to own in the market. Reminder again, we spent a whole webinar on this, and I already talked about it this morning, but you need a great team. Make sure everyone on your team knows their role. No role is more important than another. Their titles. I don't care if you are president or you are an administrative assistant in some area. A company or an organization does not function without every role. Every role is unique, and it's together that we're able to move forward. Individuals don't build companies, teams build companies. And once we have a great team, we've got to communicate, and we've got to communicate early and often. There is absolutely no room for lack of communication. So make sure you set up a process where you're communicating regularly, you're checking in regularly, without creating a meeting schedule that is so onerous that people don't want to do it. And as I close this webinar a little bit later, I'll give you some suggestions from some of the best in the world about a great meeting schedule for you and your team. The other thing we have to think about is this concept of risk in entrepreneurship. And the world thinks that all of you as entrepreneurs, that you are gamblers and risk takers. I can tell you, my observation is that the best entrepreneurs in the world are not risk takers, they're risk mitigators. So they're really good at getting the odds in their favor. They're really good at analyzing risk. Then they will certainly take a risk, but only after they analyzed it and can get the probability in their favor. Franz Johansson has a great TED Talk if you ever want to listen to it, but he also has a great book called The Medici Effect, and he talks about that as humans, we're not rational in how we think about risk. Again, we're biological, so emotions and fears particularly play a big part in our perception of what we see as possible loss versus possible gains. He goes on to talk about a couple strategies. We can avoid behavioral traps related to risk. So we can understand our gator brain and how it works and fight or flight response. And we can also acknowledge risk and fears. So, behavioral traps are around if we think things are going well, we kind of stay on that path. So we become risk averse. Maybe an example that's easy to understand is, why do people have difficulty once they have a job and everything deciding to become an entrepreneur? And that's because if you have a job and you have an income and you have a family and you're supporting them, even though the future may be brighter as an entrepreneur, there's risk associated with that. So our brains are afraid of that. So if things are going well, we want to kind of stay where we're at. But we have to view risk as something that we have to take, and don't think about just gambling again. think about how our gator, what I call our gator brain or our reptilian brain works to paralyze us. And the best way to really combat this fear is to acknowledge it. And Franz goes on to talk about in his book, talks a lot about, in the end, here's the reality, back to biology. We can't escape these fears. They're hardwired into us, but we can certainly learn how to manage them. And that's what we really need to think about, is how do we manage those? And entrepreneurship and improvisation. This is really critical because I know, watching a lot of companies, and in my own experience too, I call it the 90-10-10 rule, and meaning that 90% of the time when I'm working on things and doing things, they don't work out. But the 10% of the time that they do is where I can make major, major steps forward. So you have to look at entrepreneurship very similarly to improvisation. And with improvisation, you're always saying yes and, not yes but yes and, or not saying no to things. We're always saying yes to things. And sometimes the best ideas, like improvisation, come not on the first time, but on the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth and even the 50th try is where the best opportunities come for us. So remember, entrepreneurship is an iterative process where we take a couple steps forward, take a step backward as we gain information, kind of reposition, and then take another couple steps forward. It's a process that will never end with your business, and you have to really, really pay attention to that. In startups, you'll hear the word used, and I think quite frankly overly used, but you hear the word used, pivot. Yeah, pivot is part of this process in a way. It's like, we know we're trying to go from point A to point B. There's many roads to get there. As we gather information from listening to customers or potential customers, we can make adjustments on our road to where we're going. And certainly an area that a lot of people, small businesses, struggle with is cash. So being strapped for cash. And remember, cash is king and queen. Nothing new to you, but cash is your lifeblood. It's your oxygen. It gives you room to breathe. It gives you liquidity. And once you have liquidity, you have a lot of options, right? You don't have somebody breathing down your neck waiting to be paid. Liquidity gives you some options. So it's important that we focus on cash flow. And so many of us, when we look at our financials, most people look at their income statements, thankfully. Few people that I know of in small business look at their balance sheet, and hardly anyone looks at cash flow statements. And all three of those make up your financials. So make sure you're looking at cash flow statements. Make sure you're looking at cash flow predictions of where you're going. And you can control cash flow, right? But you only can control a few areas. You can control your sales timeline. So from start to finish, from the first time you approach a potential customer, how long does it take you to close a sale? If you shrink that, you improve your cash flow. You can improve your delivery timeline. So from the time you sign a contract to you deliver the final product and get paid, can you shrink that cycle down? You control that to some level. Another one that many small businesses I see, which drives me crazy, but is the billing and payment timeline. Believe it or not, there are businesses that get so busy that they don't sit down to write bills, and then they don't have any cash, obviously. You control that. Are you sending bills every day? Are you following up when you're not getting paid? And the last area you control is the make production or the inventory timeline. Do you want to use just-in-time inventory? Do you have stuff on the shelf? All of that, of course, takes cash, and you control it. For those of you in a lifestyle business, another way to control cash is the concept of bootstrapping, or just being really, really careful about how we spend our money, and controlling cash that way. So think of bootstrapping as scratching and clawing as long as we can. But we have to be careful that if we're going to bootstrap and not take outside investment, that we're careful that we are not so careful that we get run over by our competition. So we don't want to bootstrap to the point and not take a loan or not take money if it's hurting the company's ability to move fast enough in the marketplace. And I don't want to go academic on you, but I can't help but share this. This is a model that I love from Timmons, who I still believe is at Babson, but this came from Babson. And this is the Timmons model of entrepreneurship. And all I want you to remember is when I think about entrepreneurship, your job as a lead entrepreneur is to really balance these three balls that you have to work with. And that's the opportunity that is in front of you, the resources that you have available, and the team that you have put in place. And if I were to really dig into this model, what you need to know, these balls are always coming out of balance. And you'll see that you, the founder or the lead entrepreneur, are kind of the pivot point, and that beam across there is a balance beam. They're always coming out of balance, and your job is to balance them. If the opportunity gets bigger and you tip to the left, how do you get more resources? How do you build a better team to align with that opportunity? So just remember, these are areas that you really, really, really need to pay attention to. So we talked about this, I believe, last month, and just reminding you again, and these are my ideas about why businesses don't scale. And just to remind you of this, and then I'm going to move into strategy and try to keep strategy relatively simple for you and think about strategic planning. So as we get to strategic planning, we know we should do it. I think most of us do, but we don't do it. Many of us think it's a waste of time. We think it takes way too much time. We don't think it really is going to work. And a lot of that is based on our previous experiences with it. We think it's super complicated. Some of us don't believe we can do it without a consultant. And when we have done it before, which some people have either been in a corporate environment where they've done it, or they've tried to do it with their small to mid-sized business, and it's failed and they've abandoned it. And number 7 is not because you maybe didn't have a good strategic plan. It's because you didn't have a good execution strategy. So let's look at strategic planning. So why should we even think about strategic planning? Why plan at all? And I think the premise is, here we have, I don't even know if any of you recognize this, but a paper map. They do still exist, but where are we going to go? So a strategic plan allows us to understand where we're going to go. And also, if we have a destination in mind as a company, an organization, of what we want our business to be in the future, you have to think about it. There's many ways to get there. There's a whole bunch of different roads on this map you could take to get from point A to point B. But which is the best way to get there for us or for our company? And this picture is a reminder to me about how many small businesses operate. So many times we're operating in a form of chaos, and many businesses are successful despite this. And what I mean by that is this power actually probably works. But if this were a business, imagine cutting one of these lines and we cut our power. How do we fix it? Well, I'm going to tell you, the lead entrepreneur, knows and understands this intricate mess in great detail. But my concern is what happens when we remove you from the equation? Who's going to fix it? And that's the problem when everything relies on the individual entrepreneur. And we have this chaos and this messy process of getting everything done. And it works. It works because we're there, but only because you understand it. How does anyone else even know what to do? Your business can't be about you. In the end, the best businesses are, if we can make a business that has the people and the processes in place, that you certainly can be there and we want you there, but it can run without you. That's the business that we want to help you try to build. So remember too, the other thing about strategy is it begins to align our organization. If we know where we're going and we can have a clear strategy around it, we begin to get alignment with the team. And it also allows us, as we have opportunities constantly crossing our desk, we can see if they align with our strategy. And it's a much better way, or a tool that we can use to say, yes, we should go forward this, or no, we shouldn't. And again, I want to remind you about cash flow. And if we don't have clear strategy, we're really firefighting. And I don't know anybody that can say that firefighting in the end doesn't cost you money, because it certainly does. And if any of you, if we've had this in class, you've seen this picture before, but this is where I like to say strategic plans go to die. after a great retreat and a consultant and lots of work, we build this big fat 3-ring binder of all these cool things we're going to do. It goes on a shelf, never to be understood by anyone other than the senior team that was there, never to be pulled off the shelf, never to be looked at again until next year when we think about it. So the reminder is, what do we really need to have a successful strategic plan to create this clear direction? So to have it, it's got to be thoughtful, it's got to be active, it's got to be simple, it's got to give clear direction for you and your team on your business journey. It's got to create alignment, and it's got to be that tool that allows you to be able to weigh opportunities that are in front of you. So what do successful strategic plans need? They need to involve your senior team for sure. That's your job to create the vision for your company, or what Vern Harnish calls execution planning. They've got to be simple. They got to be updated frequently, and they have to have someone hold you accountable, whether that's an outside coach or you do it internally in order to execute. A great resource for you, Scaling Up, How a Few Companies Make It and Why the Rest Don't, by Vern Harnish, where he talks about these 4 areas of people, strategy, execution, cash. He also had, the first book was Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. Get this book. It doesn't have to be something you read cover to cover, although it's very readable cover to cover. It can just be a resource for you when you want to work on an area where you can open it up, and it's broke up in such a way that it's a very, very valuable tool for you. The other thing we know about strategy is it does not need to be a lengthy action plan. It shouldn't be a lengthy action plan, but it's the evolution of a central idea through a world that's constantly changing. So Jack Welch used to talk about making sure we behave like a small company. So small companies have this huge competitive advantage if we're smart about it, because it's not cluttered, it's simple, it's informal, we can react quickly, we don't have bureaucracy, we can grow on good ideas, doesn't matter where the source of those ideas come from. So this is the part that we have to think about. It's got to be something that is malleable, that is movable, but it has to be focused on a clear goal moving forward. And in the end, if we don't have flawless execution, having a strategy isn't good enough. Without flawless execution, you've got nothing. Anybody can plan, and that's a really frustrating part. Probably in your company, if you bring up strategic planning, people are going to start to have a bit of a mini panic attack because they've been through it before, and the results have been, again, we've done all this good work, but we've not executed. So how do you execute on your strategic plan? Vern talks about 3 execution decisions. Those are priorities that align your team, making sure you have the right data and metrics, and meeting rhythms for a better result. So I'll go through these quickly and kind of bring this to an end for you. So priorities that align your team, things like collecting the right data, but making sure you know what's important and what are, quite simply, the priorities, what comes first. And a lot of times as business owners, we have trouble deciding what comes first. And that's the point of strategy. What's the one thing that we have to focus on to move our company forward? And it can't be everything all the time. The second is metrics. If we don't have really great metrics, if we're not measuring, how do we make the right decisions or know if our strategy is moving forward well? And the last area is meeting rhythm. So much like jazz, if any of you enjoy jazz, it's all about the give and take. It's all about the rhythm. It's all about the ability for people to know where we're going in the music, but to be able to have the freedom to be creative and get there many, many different ways. But if we clearly know where we're going, we have a rhythm to constantly communicate as a team. So I'm going to share with you a rhythm from Gazelles International, and this is a guide to effective meeting rhythms. And we like to talk a lot about the quarter being a 13-week race. If you look at this, first it starts with a daily meeting or a huddle, which provides quick synchronization. We talk about good news, what's up, where you stuck. These meetings are typically stand-up meetings, very short, 7-8 minutes long. We have a weekly meeting where we talk about tactical actions, communications, focusing on deliverables. We have a monthly meeting where we start to talk about strategic initiatives and how they're moving forward, what's our major opportunity, solve a major problem. Because remember, when we're bringing the team together, we've got the brain power of all those people helping us work together. And we all know that brains together work at a much better pace off of each other. And then we have a quarterly meeting where we're looking at themes to support our strategic plan, goals, desired results. And if you look at this, you'll see you go weekly meeting, which then turns into your monthly meeting. After 3 monthly meetings, it turns into your quarterly meeting. And you could do that keep doing that. And then at the end of the year, you have your strategic planning meeting again. But what I want you to see, as you think about strategic planning and you start to incorporate it, what we're trying to do is keep that strategy and strategic plan alive and not just make it an annual event. So here are some resources for you. JimCollins.com has some great tools about values. Gazelles.com has some great tools. There's Vern's books. There's many other books. We have some team-based strategic planning workshops that we run at the end of the year in preparation for the start of your new year. So, feel free to jump in to any of those if you're interested in them. If you need more help, reach out to us at the center. If you're interested in CEL and what we're doing, please call the office, and you're welcome to join us for graduation ceremony next week if you want to see a little bit more about the program. So I don't believe we have any questions at this time. So we went a little bit over our 30 minutes, but just barely. So I want to say thank you for joining us. Hopefully you are able to take a little bits of tidbits of learning for today. And we're going to be a little bit different timing-wise this month. So we'll be with you actually at the end of July due to a couple breaks we have in here, where we're going to talk about price and pricing. And is your price too high? So we're going to talk about how do you price your products? What are the different strategies for pricing? So I hope you will join us then. Thank you very much for being with us. So this is Tom Albrecht from UB Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership, and have a great day.